Hello and welcome to episode 0 of Tool Use. If it's your first time joining us, which I assume is the case for everyone unless you're my dad, on Tool Use we do weekly experiments using the latest AI tools to help demystify and educate you so you can bring them into your workflow and automate parts of your life. We'll also touch on updates in the AI industry that probably didn't make the AI headlines, but are something that we think you should learn about. I'm Mike Bird. With me is Ty Fierro. For a little bit of background, Ty and I met at Open Interpreter where we work together. And to pay homage to that, we're going to do a little bit of Open Interpreter experiments this week. Ty, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. It's feeling good this week. I'm excited to get this kicked off, and it's so fun to build with technology you're familiar with. So, like, building demos this week was easy, partially because Open Interpreter is built so well, and partially because we know the technology so well. So it's incredible what you can do with just a little bit of elbow grease, and the results are pretty impressive. So looking forward to diving into it.
Love it. And yeah, one of the biggest feedbacks I get from the community is that they just want to understand like how to work with Open Interpreter. What can it do? So I feel putting together a few actual examples is going to be really helpful for them. And honestly, like you said, it's just been fun. I really like being able to kind of like deviate from the day job and just build something we find useful. And I actually think what I put together this week is going to be helpful for our podcast. So I think there's going to be, double dipping in practicality.
That's perfect. I love that. Yeah, I think mine will also be helpful for the podcast. Maybe slightly less helpful, but still pretty cool. I think you're going to like it. Do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So I created this test vault in Obsidian, completely empty. You can see, just make a little test file. And this is going to be representative of our knowledge base. I made a couple Python scripts. So the first is the server. Basic Flask server takes in HTTP requests and then passes the contents along to Open Interpreter, which is pointed at the Obsidian Vault. I'm actually made a custom profile, which I'll be putting up in a PR to Open Interpreter, so you can check it out for yourself. And then I made one other script for voice input, where it just transcribes your voice and then sends it along to the server. I would like a directory for episode 0. This should contain a file for feedback, with headers for common methods of feedback as well as popular social media channels. Send that along to the server. Starts making its plan. You can see it generated the directory for episode 0. I'll let it keep working on this thing. And then we were able to open a feedback, and you can see we have all the different ways that we can receive feedback. Awesome, looks good. Now, the one thing I don't like about it, I don't like Facebook. I don't use Facebook. So let's change it. But what I actually did, instead of having to go through the server route, is I made a plugin for Obsidian so you can actually use Open Interpreter directly inside your vault. So please update feedback to change Facebook to YouTube. Send that through. We have a little UI that pops up. I think it could be improved a bit. You can't drag it around, but it will ask you to approve the code. It'll scan the vault, figure out what's in there, and then it will write instructions for what it wants to update, ask you permission along the way so you don't have to worry about it updating your content against your wishes. Feel free to reach out if you need further help. Check it out.
Boom.
And Facebook's been changed to YouTube.
Oh, that's great.
So just like that, we're able to have a little assistant, Open Interpreter's breadth of capability, controlling our Obsidian vault. So if we want to just like dish off commands, delegate things, being like, I need a new file on this. I want you to research so-and-so and put all of the information in a single file. We're able to do that now using natural language.
I love that you made a custom UI for it in this plugin in Obsidian. I just that's going to make way more people excited to use this type of technology if they don't have to dig into their terminal and play with it that way. So it's super exciting that it has its own little place to edit files and create content, and you can just trigger it with just an Obsidian plugin. That's great. Is this published yet, or is it in progress?
It's in progress. I think you could tell from the UI. I couldn't drag it around. It wasn't really differentiating between code and text output. I think it could use a little bit of polishing. The Open Interpreter profile for Obsidian will be up for people to check out for themselves. But I will make sure to share out to people when the Obsidian plugin is up, because I do feel like this is something people want to use, especially if you power it with Llama 3.1 or something locally. You don't even have to pay for an API. You can just take the power of AI to help you store the information of your life in Obsidian.
I wonder if you could get Open Interpreter to create its own vector database URL and then go through your whole Obsidian and embed all of them into your own little vector database. And then you can use Open Interpreter to do some cool stuff. create me a summary of all of my writings over the last 2 months. And it could use, its different embeddings for all the different things it's used and actually create something that's completely new based on all of the content you've made. That could be cool.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if between AFES and O1 and Open Interpreter that we could put something together really cool for this.
That's awesome, man. Great demo. It looks great. It worked fantastically, too.
Thanks, man. Yeah, definitely some room for improvement. I feel that people will want to have settings so they can customize their model instead of having to change it in the plugin. I think that the UI could use a little improvement. But all these things are small little like add-ons and increments, but the core functionality is there, and as soon as we put it out, it'll be open source so people can kind of take it and build upon it. I see a lot of potential for it.
Well, I love it, man. That's super cool. All right, I guess I can show you what I built now, huh? Okay, I built something pretty cool. Let me share my screen. I'm pretty proud of it for how little time I spent on it, and I do think it's actually, I think it's one of the coolest things to happen to Open Interpreter in a long time. Okay, so I have this really cool little picture of a puffin here. And I can take this little puffin picture. Oh man, I didn't do the CV. Okay, so let me try this again. I got this cool picture of a puffin. So all I gotta do is I type CV. Let's do something simple first. We'll just go from PNG to JPEG just to prove it can do that. This one should be a home run for it. Let's see here. Boom, that was quick. And now we have a puffin JPEG. Okay, now we can do something kind of really cool. This one kind of blew my mind when I played with it yesterday. I can actually take this picture of a puffin, and I can really do some cool stuff with it. So if I take this puffin, and I do a CV, drag this puffin right in, and then I do 2 ASCII TXT. Let's see if it can handle that.
No.
Oh, yes. Just you wait. Okay, so it's already got Pillow installed, because of course it does. Now let's see what it can do here. This one blew my muffin cat back last night. All right, okay, so it actually tried to display it here, but let's actually see what the TXT file it generated. Boom, puffin, look at that. I mean, that's pretty wild. I mean, compare that to the actual image. I'm impressed. And so that's pretty crazy. So we can do some cool stuff like that. I mean, let's take this even further. Let's try something. Okay, let's go a little more meta. So I have this, I've been playing with Crew AI, the framework for building agent crews. And I have this code file. Let's try something like convert. I'm going to drag this in here, and then we do to mermaid MD. So I can take this code file, and it's going to make it's going to display the code so it can read it, obviously. And now that it has this context, Claude's going to take this, it's going to actually create a markdown file that has a mermaid diagram. Boom. It actually made the whole mermaid diagram of that code file. And so you can imagine even taking like code bases or things like this and being able to drag it in there and have it create mermaid diagrams. So that's pretty cool. So we can get pretty meta with that. Imagine all those different things you could turn into diagrams, but we can go even more meta. So let's try something really wild. Oh, when I was at a business event, I met this guy right here.
Yeah, I know him.
Yeah, right? In this sweet little business card I threw together in Canva. But if I took a picture of this business card, I drag it in, I can actually make this a contact. Let's see how it can handle this. All right, gonna make a VCF, the contact format. It's gonna extract the information. And it created it. All right, so let's see if this actually worked. If I open this up, add one card, boom. It actually got the address, the email, the phone, and the title out of that. Added as a contact into my contacts app. Pretty wild, actually. I think that's crazy. And so yeah, there's other demos I could do. I mean, this thing can do all sorts of stuff. But how this is built is it's a custom script that is built with Poetry. With Poetry, you can specify scripts. Like right now, Open Interpreter has one where you can just hit I and then say what you want, and then it'll kind of just go off to the races. I kind of took that as inspiration, made my own. That's just called CV. So it's just anywhere on your file system, you can hit CV. paste in or drag in the file you want to convert, or the URL you want to convert, or the text you want to convert, or literally anything you want to convert into whatever, and convert it. And so what I did is, once I made that, it's on my local branch, but you can do this thing called pip install-e dot. And if you do pip install-e, it actually installs that poetry command as a global command across your entire machine. And you can also just modify the code base and it updates everywhere, which is pretty wild. So that's kind of how I built it. It has its own custom instructions inside there that I designed very specifically for file conversion. So I told it to try to do everything in one shot. Always copy a file and then modify it so that you don't corrupt the original file. Basically take the path that was given to you and assume that that's the path where they want it saved. And if they don't specify a path, or if it's a URL, just default to the desktop instead. So that's kind of how it's built. And I actually got the prompt kind of right. Like, as you can see, almost all of those one shot pretty well. It might be also because I'm using Claude 3.5 Sonnet. I just wanted the demos to work first try. But I mean, I bet it would work if I tried it with Llama 70B. I bet I could run, I wonder if it even worked in 8B. Like, a lot of these are pretty simple. Like PNG to JPEG, it would handle that no problem. So anyway, pretty wild. I mean, I just feel like this is a use case of Open Interpreter that I've been using with it for a long time, and other people should use, and I don't think people use enough of. I mean, if you're paying for one of those services online where you're dragging something in and converting it to an image or something else, like, just stop paying for it. Just download Open Interpreter and have it do it for you, because they can just write the code to do it. And my favorite part of all of this is just how meta it can get. Like, it taking an image and converting it to ASCII art, or it taking a business card and turning it to a contact, or a code file and turning it into a diagram. I mean, like, that's not really a file conversion per se. It's almost like a information conversion, right? So it's taking one amount of information and converting it to another useful piece of information. But you can take this so deep. Like, I had another demo I tried last night where you can take I had like an apple pie recipe, drag in the URL of the apple pie recipe. It wrote code to scrape the website, took the recipe out of it, saved it to a markdown file, and then texted it to me. Like, that's pretty crazy. You know, like, sure, I could probably go through the whole thing and copy and paste it, but I mean, pretty wild. Oh, I have one more demo too. I forgot about this. So this is the true power of local code interpreting language models. This is why Open Interpreter is so powerful, and I want to see any cloud service do this for you. I can hit CV and I can drag an entire folder. I mean, this is hundreds of high resolution images, 14 megabytes, 13 megabytes, 12 megabytes. These are all JPEG images, and I can convert all of these to PNG. And it'll do it because it can do that. It can just make a loop, it can write the code, and it's off to the races. Okay, so it listed out all the files, and now it's going to do this, sure, image magic thing, but it can actually do all of this in a loop and generate all of these in one big thing. So I think that's the huge, I mean, this could be a terabyte of files. And all it takes is a piece of code to turn one thing into another, put it in a loop, have it run on your local machine so you're not constrained by cloud resources. I think it's incredible. I mean, you're not going to get that out of ChatGPT. But I think that's the true power of Open Interpreter. And I don't think it's used as much as it should be. So I think something like this, I would love to get this into the actual repo at some point. I'll float it by Killian, but it would be nice. I mean, CV, paste something in. It's almost like just like a universal file conversion window. Drag something in, convert it to something else. Ta-da! There's my bow.
I loved it, man. That was awesome. Yeah, the idea of like data transformation instead of just file transformation, super appealing. And love their point about being able to negate network latency and network bandwidth trying to upload an entire terabyte of information where you can just do it locally. You don't even have to feed into the context of the LLM. You're just like, I need code to do this. It writes the code, and then code hyper efficient, hyper local, does it all for you. The ASCII art blew my mind. I loved seeing that because you see, like, that's one of like the classic tests, like, hey, OpenAI, can you draw a unicorn in ASCII art? And it always butchers it. But being able to take a complex image like that Puffin and turn to ASCII art in like a really good fashion was super
And
impressive.
the way that it actually did it too, like it takes the image, it converts it, it calculates the height of the image in pixels, and it does a conversion to say, okay, well, how many characters, how many lines of characters would I need to make this ASCII art? And then it's going to use, I think it's Pillow, which is a library in Python that takes the image. It determines how dark or light that little section is. So it basically turns into a whole grid. And then each little grid, it determines the lightness or darkness, which is just like a 0 to 1, like a 0.5 being in the middle or whatever. And then it just assigns it to a character that it generated. Right, so it's like, I think that the and sign is darker than the plus sign, so a darker one is going to correspond to that. And then it creates a text file by dumping in all of those grid coordinates with all of those ASCII. And it happened like that. It happened so fast that we don't really appreciate everything that went under the hood there. It actually did something pretty astonishing in one shot and generated ASCII art. How useful is ASCII art? I'm not sure, but it is very cool that it can do that.
Absolutely. And then even just the range of like cool novelty to like practicality, being able to take a photo of a business card and convert it to a contact. There are people trying to come up with different technological ways of doing that, but you don't have to worry about like NFC tapping. If you can just snap a photo of everyone you meet, upload the entire folder into Open Interpreter, and all of a sudden, bam, you get an extra 20 contacts just from the photos you took.
That's a great example, actually. You just take a bunch of images of business cards and turn them all into a bunch of contacts. Anyway, super wild. I mean, you could probably even, this might be a stretch, but I mean, you could even take a list of people's like business cards and have Open Interpreter OS mode, go look them up on LinkedIn and add them on LinkedIn or something. I mean, like the combinations here, the multi-step combinations, I think are incredible. But that's my demo.
Yep.
Convert anything to anything, any file, any information, any data to anything.
The Swiss Army knife of AI tools.
Yeah, right. And it's a cool tool that we can use for the podcast, that people can use for, I mean, I imagine this for video editors or Photoshop people, and they can convert things to whatever they want to. And you can also get like, hey, take this whole stack of photos and zoom them all out a little bit, make the backgrounds black, and then like round the edges. And it can handle that type of stuff, which is actually crazy. So it could take a whole folder and add a vignette to all of them. So really cool stuff you can do there.
Yeah, web design, you want to have it be responsive to different screen formats. Just tell Open Interpreter, we need this entire directory change to be ABC format. Let it do its thing. You don't have to worry about anything else.
Fantastic. Anyway, that's my demo.
No, it was awesome. Really liked it. Great job.
All right, so I guess we can move into our next section.
I think some people might have missed this week an announcement for Based Hardware. Based Hardware is a company that makes open source AI hardware devices. Great people, really enjoy it, where they've taken their friend necklace, which I actually have one right here, and they also have Open Glass, which is the open source alternative to Meta Ray-Bans, so you can actually get a vision feed from the glasses you wear, brought them together into Omi. So Omi is now a single repo where it'll actually have both devices being able to work with each other, which is super exciting. So this was, I think, in response to a lot of the drama that went on with like, oh, now there's two type of friend AI wearable devices. So by making it a more clear distinction that this is the open source community, you can build upon it, you can extend it, you can write plugins for it. Really cool options. They also just came out with their Dev Kit 2. So what I have is the Dev Kit 1, good at transcribing. It'll create memories from the conversations you have. I tend to just use it as a tool during my workday rather than when I'm out and about. But it's been really neat being able to have it sitting on my desk as I'm in a meeting and then actually have a list of action items from that meeting. So it's been a valuable tool. But with DevKit 2, they've actually added more onboard storage, so you don't need to connect to your phone, and they have a programmable button on it. So if you want to trigger an action or have it offload all the memories onto your computer or something, you're going to be able to set that up. So definitely a space I think people should watch. It's one of those products that has a lot of potential, and being open source, it's close to my heart. So I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that one.
That's awesome, man. Nick's doing great things too. He's just, I love the way he runs the company. I also love the way he runs his Twitter, because he gave us free devices at the engineering conference to get the word out, and gave it to different presenters and things like that. And I love that he's hiring right now too, and I saw that he hires and will give good salaries and give good equity. Like he's very generous with what he's working with here, and I feel like that's a recipe for something really great. I back him. If they were a stock, I'd invest, you know.
Yeah, not financial advice, but do it.
I'm not a qualified investor, but Yeah. I like what Nick's been up to. That's awesome.
What about you? What have you heard this week that I think people should be aware of?
Well, I was gonna share a screen share of it, but I guess it's not that important. But Harrison Chase of LangChain shared a blog post he wrote about last week called "Ambient Agents" and Ambient Agent UX, and I saw this when I was like kind of tired one night, but I just saw the two words of ambient agent, and it got my brain running. Ambient agent, something that sits in the background, always on, doing things for you. I mean, the possibilities that this opens up. I mean, like, is that what does the ideal user experience of agents look like? And I don't think it's something that you have to prompt every single time. This would be something that has a specific job, works in the background just like a teammate does, and you can check in on its progress, and you can have some human in the loop and guide it in the right direction. But getting the UX for that is going to be difficult. And Harrison talks about the whole blog post about what that might look like. And he used a table, kind of like a Excel sheet format, which I think makes a lot of sense because if you have multiple agents in a table, you can display a lot of different rich information, like what tasks were assigned to them and what their status is and how far along are they and who are they communicating with these other agents. So I think that's really interesting to me. But the UX is going to be important there. So you're going to have really good observability. You're going to have to see what the thing has done and what it is going to do. You're going to have to be able to interject and guide it in the right direction and give it new tasks. And ideally, sometimes the best UI is no UI. You know, like, should this thing even be a window on your screen? Does it have to be? Can it just live in the background and maybe pop up if you really ask for it? But I love this idea of ambient agents and these agents that do specific things for you in interesting ways without you necessarily having to ask. So that's what people missed this week from me.
Love it. Definitely part of the future. I've been a huge proponent of the idea of the future being a collection of highly specialized, well-orchestrated AI agents rather than like a big, robust one, and having the idea of one that you interface with controlling a fleet that you don't, where they can actually be delegated a task and execute it, I think is definitely going to be the future. I love that people are thinking about this. The UX is one that I tend to not think about very often, because I even think, going back to the earlier demo, Obsidian would be an awesome place for this, where you could have the flexibility that it offers, because I don't think there's going to be a one-size-fits-all answer, depending on even the agent's task. There's going to be sometimes you want to see like a progress bar. How far along is it? Do you want to proofread the content it's been scraping, making sure it doesn't pursue the wrong path too far, have like fact checkers? There's so many different things that pop up because infinity tasks will have infinity possibilities for UI. So I think there's going to be a requirement for generative AI being able to like dynamically create an interface based upon the task. It's a very exciting time. I'm glad we're at like the ground floor of this, because the way it's going to evolve is going to unlock so much capability.
Absolutely. And I think I mentioned earlier during your demo that it feels like it's a playground for AI agents. You know, like this Obsidian would be an interesting thing because it's just a folder of markdown files. And maybe the interface of the future of agents is just a folder. And it's just a folder of folders, and each folder has different attachments and different files and different markdown files that display all of its information, or even system prompts. And I don't know, that's really interesting. And then markdown is just such an extensible thing. I mean, you just built a plugin that writes markdown, and that's one of the things I love most about Obsidian is it's just a wrapper over the markdown on your machine rather than a database wrapper like a Notion is or something like that. So that's actually an interesting idea of using Obsidian as a UI for this.
Yeah, and I've even thought, I forget what it's called now. I was trying to just find it really quick. It was an old AI experiment. I think Stanford put it out when they had 10 different agents in a little world interacting. It had the old Pokemon Game Boy-esque graphics where people interacted. And maybe there'll be something like that where it's gamified to a way where you can have your supervisor view and you can see what each one's up to right now, and just makes it like a cutesy little thing. But maybe people don't want that. Maybe people thrive in their spreadsheet world where they can actually just see raw numbers and data and not have to worry about any type of graphics. Then you get to think, what about voice? Like, how much graphical user interface do we actually need when voice and audio become such an integral part of it? I still feel from bandwidth alone, GUIs make a lot more sense, but hey, everyone's got different needs, different wants, so we got to keep it flexible.
100%. Yeah, it's super interesting.
So what are you thinking for next time?
Yeah, I kind of like this idea of web scraping. I think you mentioned, but there was a Fireship video recently talked about like the legality of web scraping, and there's definitely some legal gray areas. But if we're ever going to do an episode on web scraping, we should do it sooner rather than later in case it's ever not legal anymore. But I think it's really interesting, and there's some really cool tools out there like Firecrawl and some of these other things that scrape websites into LLM friendly information, and I bet we can make some pretty cool demos off of that.
Yeah, the fact that data is like the lifeblood of this whole thing, I do think we should capture this sooner rather than later. We can explore some possibilities, see what we can do with it. But yeah, web scraping, some type of data collection, aggregation, summarization. I think we could do some cool stuff with it.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Let's do it. All right, Mike, great talk today.
Yeah, buddy, great job.
Let's see you next time.
Yeah, same time next week.
Let's do it. That sounds good.